Hi, friends. I'm Rebecca Faust, and this is What We Don't Say, where we have honest conversations about fear, patterns, growth, what it looks like to reconnect with yourself. In other words, things we experience but don't typically say out loud. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Last week, we talked about running little trials, about giving ourselves permission to learn instead of judge. And if you've actually tried doing that, you've probably noticed something. Running a trial still requires making a decision. You still have to choose. And that's where I think so many of us high achievers get stuck. One of the most common things I hear in coaching sounds something like, Rebecca, I just need to know. I just need to know if I should leave, if I should apply, if he'll change, if I should stay until my bonus pays out. Maybe you've said some version of that too. And on the surface, those sound like practical questions. But over the years, I've realized they're usually not. Because my clients aren't really asking, should I leave? They're asking, what if I make the wrong choice? They're asking, what if I waste years of my life? What if I regret it? What if this proves that I'm not good enough? They believe there is one single right path, and their job is to figure out what it is before they move forward. And honestly, that's an incredible amount of pressure to carry. And maybe that's why you're exhausted. Not because the decision is actually impossible, but because you've convinced yourself it has to be perfect. You're carrying the weight of believing one decision could determine your entire future. This is important to me because I've watched so many incredible women carry an unbelievable amount of pressure. Pressure to make the right decision, not waste any time, not regret anything. Pressure to make sure every choice somehow leads to the perfect outcome. And trust me, I get it. I really do. Because I've been there. I've felt it too. But here's what I've started noticing. The pressure we put on ourselves to make the perfect decision often keeps us from making any decision at all. Or it keeps us waiting to apply, to leave, to speak up, waiting to finally begin. And while we're trying so hard to protect ourselves from making the wrong choice, life is quietly moving forward. One of the clearest examples of this happened to me before I moved to Ireland. The company had started talking about sending our team overseas. Nothing had been decided. It might happen, it might not. For months, this went on. And I remember feeling like my life was suspended. I stopped applying for promotions or other jobs in New Jersey. I wasn't really looking for somewhere I'd love to live. I was sucking it up with a roommate I didn't really like. I wasn't putting much energy into dating because I kept thinking, well, what's the point if I'm just leaving? Looking back, I used to blame my company. Why won't they just decide? What's taking so long? But now, I don't think they created my uncertainty. I did. I decided my life was on hold until they decided. I was waiting for someone else's decision before I gave myself permission to make my own. I could have applied. I could have dated. And if Ireland happened, I could have turned down the job. I could have tried long distance. I could have even decided not to go. Those options never disappeared. But in my mind, there was one right path. And until I knew what it was, I wasn't moving forward. I wasn't protecting myself. I was postponing my own life. Now, this path wasn't wrong. My approach to the Ireland situation wasn't wrong. I'm just not sure it served me best. And looking back, I know I was giving away my power over my future. It was because I really wanted to go to Ireland, but it still didn't feel great at the time. I didn't know why then, but now I can see it didn't feel good because I wasn't deciding in alignment. I wasn't living as my best self. I was letting someone else decide for me. Years later, I found myself doing something similar with my business. I'd think, if I just knew this business was going to work, then I'd really invest. Then I'd fully commit. Then I'd stop looking at finance jobs. If I just knew someone at this event was going to care about coaching, then I'd definitely network. I'd go to all the events. Everything meaningful seemed to live on the other side of if I just knew. And if I'm really honest, there was even a part of me that wanted my husband to decide for me. A part of me wanted him to say, Rebecca, we need money. It's time to go back to corporate. Because if someone else decided, then maybe I couldn't get it wrong. Eventually, eventually, I realized nobody was coming to hand me the perfect answer. I had to choose and then keep choosing. Honestly, it was both terrifying and actually freeing. That's when I started noticing something. It wasn't just Ireland or my business or my clients, it was everywhere. We spend so much time trying to make sure we're choosing correctly that we sometimes forget choosing is how we learn. Again, one of my favorite coaching conversations usually starts with, Rebecca, I just need to know. Of course, instead of me trying to answer that question, I ask a question. What would getting the right answer give you? Usually there's a laugh, potentially a sassy answer, like, well, then I'd have the right answer. But then there's a pause. And they'll say something like peace, relief, confidence, permission, freedom. Then I ask one more question. And if you already felt that, what would that make possible for you? That's when something really interesting happens. More often than not, they already know. Well, I'd leave. Obviously, I'd apply. I'd finally have the conversation. I'd start. So they already know what they want to do. They just don't want to feel scared, uncertain, or vulnerable while they do it. And I think that's incredibly human. It's such a beautiful moment when this happens because they suddenly realize they weren't actually waiting for the quote unquote right answer. They were waiting for the feeling, a feeling they thought had to come from outside themselves. Somewhere along the way, they handed an external answer the responsibility for creating an internal experience. Once I started seeing this, it suddenly made so much sense. If, as we talked about last time, getting it wrong has come to mean I'm a failure, I'm not enough, I'll regret this forever, then of course, finding the right answer feels incredibly important. Our survival mechanism isn't really looking for the right choice, though. Its goal is to avoid pain. And that's why it keeps asking, What if I regret this? What if this isn't it? What if I mess everything up? Sometimes that even looks like more research, one more opinion, one more conversation, one more sign. Not because we genuinely need more information, but because we're hoping something outside ourselves will finally make the choice feel risk-free. And unfortunately, life, as I've seen, rarely works that way. I think IVF was a clear opportunity, I don't know, kind of clear opportunity for me to put this into practice. When we first started, I thought for sure there was one path, and I was kind of obsessed with this one path, IVF. My eggs, my husband's sperm, done. But eventually, our world became smaller and then bigger. Suddenly, there was IVF, adoption, donor eggs, surrogacy, and somewhere in there, we had a conversation. Instead of trying to solve every future decision or figure out exactly how we were going to build our family, we started asking, what feels right for now? Let's do another retrieval. Then we'll decide. Let's do another transfer. Then we'll decide. We didn't have to know the entire journey. We only had to choose the next step. And I think that's true far more often than we realize. We put so much pressure on today's decision because we believe it locks in tomorrow. Sometimes it simply opens the next door. So today, as always, I'd love to leave you with some questions for reflection. Where in your life are you trying so hard to make the perfect right decision that perhaps you've stopped making any decision? What do you believe getting the right answer would actually give you? And is it possible you already know more than you're giving yourself credit for? Again, as always, I invite you to say the answers out loud, even if no one else is listening, because something does change when we hear ourselves saying the truth and speaking things out loud. I don't know what decision you're carrying right now. Maybe it's your career, your marriage, maybe it's becoming a parent, maybe it's something no one else even knows you're wrestling with. But I hope that this week you notice just how much pressure you've been carrying, and maybe, just maybe, even for 20 minutes, you set a little bit of it down. Thanks so much for being here. I'll see you next time. Be well.